Flight Path to Freedom follows Marcus Johnson, a skilled co-pilot confronting the harsh realities of prejudice in the aviation industry. Assigned to work with Jack Thompson, a captain with a narrow perspective, Marcus must prove his worth when a life-threatening in-flight emergency forces them to depend on each other. Their unexpected bond sparks a fight against bias, leading them to mentor aspiring pilots and challenge the stereotypes that threaten their profession. With rising tensions and new challenges on the horizon, can their partnership survive the turbulence ahead? Join Marcus and Tom on this gripping journey filled with breathtaking flights, transformative experiences, and the pursuit of equality in the skies. Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for updates on their adventures in aviation. Now, let's take off into the story of Flight Path to Freedom. Marcus Johnson adjusted his tie as he stood before the towering SkyTrail Airlines headquarters. The sun rose behind the sleek building, casting long shadows on the quiet streets of downtown Chicago. Today marked the beginning of a dream he'd chased for years, a chance to pilot for one of the world's most renowned airlines. As a young boy growing up in Detroit, Marcus had been fascinated by the sight of planes cutting through the sky. His mother had noticed his curiosity early on, and had often found him with his nose pressed against the airport observation deck glass, marveling at takeoffs and landings. She would place a steady hand on his shoulder and tell him, "One day, you'll be up there too." Now, with his uniform crisp and his heart pounding with anticipation, he was. He took a steadying breath and stepped inside, feeling both the excitement and the weight of responsibility. Inside the training room, Marcus joined a group of new hires, a mixture of fresh-faced pilots and seasoned aviators transferring from other airlines. Amidst the hushed conversations, Marcus's attention shifted to a man at the far end of the room. Tall, with a steely presence and sharp eyes, Captain Tom Sanders exuded authority. Tom Sanders was a name that most SkyTrail employees knew. He had been with the airline for nearly 3 decades and had built a reputation as one of the best, but also as one of the toughest. Though many respected his skills and judgment, whispers about his strict, often inflexible demeanor traveled through the ranks. When Tom noticed Marcus looking his way, his gaze flicked over him, lingering for a brief second. His expression was unreadable, but Marcus could feel a hint of scrutiny in his eyes. Soon after, a SkyTrail supervisor introduced Marcus to the team, highlighting his achievements and skills. "Johnson here is an impressive addition. High scores in training, impeccable performance under pressure," she said. Tom raised an eyebrow, giving a barely perceptible nod. It was a slight acknowledgement, but Marcus didn't miss the glimmer of reservation in the captain's face. So this is how it's going to be, he thought, determined not to let the captain's judgment affect him. When Marcus reported for his first flight the next morning, his nerves were barely contained. Assigned as co-pilot, he was well prepared, but knew this was the real test. Standing by the cockpit, he ran over the checklist, double-checking every detail, aware that the captain would likely do the same. Tom arrived a few minutes later, settling into the captain's seat and barely glancing Marcus's way. "Keep the communication tight and follow my lead," he said without preamble. "Let's keep things straightforward." Marcus gave a firm nod, aware that his actions would speak louder than words. As they went through the takeoff procedure, he maintained focus, keeping every response crisp and on point. Tom remained quiet, his instructions short but efficient, leaving little room for conversation. As they climbed through the clouds, Marcus felt the rhythm of the flight begin to settle. He executed every command precisely, and despite the silence, he began to feel more at ease in the captain's presence. But when they reached cruising altitude, Tom looked over at him, his gaze unyielding. "Don't get comfortable, Johnson," he said coolly. "You may have had high scores in training, but out here, none of that matters. Show me that you can handle yourself." It wasn't an encouragement, but Marcus took it as a challenge. "Understood, Captain," he replied, his tone respectful yet firm. On subsequent flights, Marcus began noticing that Tom's approach to communication didn't extend to constructive feedback. Instead, his remarks tended to be dismissive, laced with a hint of skepticism. Anytime Marcus tried to discuss flight plans or offer his perspective, Tom's response was cool and curt, as if unwilling to see Marcus as anything but a junior. Marcus's frustration grew, but he kept his composure. He'd worked hard to be here, and no amount of belittling would drive him away from his dream. During one flight, a minor issue with the weather radar required them to adjust their route. When Marcus suggested a possible course, Tom shot down the idea almost instantly. "That's not how we do things," Tom said, overriding the suggestion without a second glance. "Stick to what I tell you, Johnson. Leave the strategy to someone with more experience." It stung, but Marcus bit back his response, reminding himself that proving his worth would take time. Yet, as the plane cruised through the sky, a steady determination took root within him. He would learn everything he could, become the best co-pilot possible. And one day, Tom would have no choice but to acknowledge his skill. The tension between Marcus and Tom didn't go unnoticed by the crew. Mia, a warm-hearted, perceptive flight attendant with years of experience, had observed the dynamic from the beginning. She made it a point to check in with Marcus after each flight, offering encouragement in small but meaningful ways. "You handled yourself well back there," she said one evening after a particularly tough flight. "Don't let Tom's attitude get to you. He has his reasons, but they don't define you." Greg, another seasoned member of the flight crew, often stepped in to subtly ease the tension, sharing light-hearted stories during layovers that gave Marcus a moment of reprieve. The crew's support gave Marcus the strength to stay grounded. He began to see the bigger picture, that while Tom's judgment weighed on him, he wasn't alone. The respect of his peers reinforced his commitment to proving his capabilities on his own terms. During his time off, Marcus would often head to a small cafe near his apartment, finding a quiet spot by the window to reflect on the recent flights and prepare for those ahead. He revisited his training notes, reread his manuals, and visualized every possible flight scenario. With each page he turned, he felt his confidence building. One evening, as he stared at the city lights outside, he made a promise to himself. "I'm here to stay, and I'm here to succeed, on my terms." The reflection steeled him. It wasn't about confronting Tom or changing his opinion. It was about living up to his own expectations, pushing himself to meet the standards he knew he was capable of. Marcus realized that his goal wasn't just to be a co-pilot, but to become a leader in his own right. And if earning Tom's respect was part of that journey, then he would do it through action, not argument. A few weeks into his position as co-pilot, Marcus arrived at the terminal one rainy morning for a long-haul flight to New York. The skies were overcast, and the weather report warned of turbulence along the way. As he prepared in the cockpit, he ran through the pre-flight checks with practiced ease, ensuring all systems were in place. Tom, on the other hand, was running late, a rare occurrence for someone of his strict demeanor. When the gate agent signaled for an update, Marcus had to make a call on whether to hold the plane or begin the boarding process. He considered his options, knowing Tom's disdain for delays, but also knowing the importance of maintaining schedule. Trusting his judgment, Marcus began the boarding process. Tom entered the cockpit moments later, his expression tense. He glanced at the status screen, noticing the boarding sequence was nearly complete. "You started without me?" Tom's voice held an edge. Marcus nodded calmly, aware of the possible backlash. "With weather conditions as they are, I thought it best to stay on schedule." Tom's silence was heavy, and though he didn't openly confront Marcus, his disapproval was clear. The captain's tightly controlled expressions told Marcus all he needed to know. He had crossed an invisible line. But he held his ground, resolute. His decision had been made with the crew and passengers in mind, and he wouldn't second-guess it. As they lifted off, the cockpit was quieter than usual. The silence between them was thick with unspoken tension, yet Marcus focused on his instruments, refusing to be rattled. This was one of many tests he'd face, and he knew his resolve had to remain unbreakable. The flight was smooth until they encountered turbulence over Pennsylvania, sending the plane into a brief but intense shake. As the aircraft shuddered, Marcus focused on stabilizing it, guiding them through the rough air. Tom glanced at him, offering no words of instruction. After a few tense moments, they broke free from the turbulence. Tom cleared his throat, barely acknowledging Marcus's handling of the situation. "A little rougher than necessary," he commented dismissively. "Work on anticipating turbulence sooner next time." Marcus kept his composure, nodding without argument. He was keenly aware that his every move was under scrutiny, but he'd begun to recognize the pattern in Tom's behavior. Any opportunity to undermine his performance was seized without hesitation. Yet Marcus knew he couldn't allow it to shake him. In the days that followed, Marcus committed himself to improving his skills in every possible way. He reviewed flight recordings, sought advice from trusted colleagues, and fine-tuned his responses to challenging situations. If there was one thing he could control, it was his performance, and he was determined to ensure it left no room for doubt. The tension between Tom and Marcus did not go unnoticed by the rest of the crew. During layovers and crew briefings, there was a distinct shift in the atmosphere. Mia, with her characteristic warmth, would offer Marcus a sympathetic smile whenever Tom left the cockpit, her quiet encouragement reinforcing Marcus's resolve. Even Greg, typically stoic, began making small gestures of support, subtly directing conversations to steer away from Tom's critiques or defusing tense moments in the cockpit. One evening after a particularly challenging flight, Mia pulled Marcus aside in the crew lounge. "You know, you're handling this better than most people would," she said, her tone gentle but firm. Marcus shrugged, trying to mask his frustration. "It's just part of the job. I didn't come here to make waves, I just want to do my best." She nodded, her expression softening. "I know, but you've got to let yourself feel it too. It's okay to be frustrated, even if you don't let it show. Just don't let it wear you down." Her words lingered with Marcus as he prepared for the next leg of their journey. He knew Mia was right. Pretending he wasn't affected by Tom's behavior was a heavy weight to carry. But he also knew that he couldn't let it become a distraction. He had to find a balance between staying true to his values and maintaining his resilience. One afternoon, during a routine pre-flight briefing, Tom addressed the crew in his typical no-nonsense style. The route would take them over the Rockies, with a known risk of turbulence. As he explained the procedures, he gave specific instructions on how he expected the crew to handle any incidents that might arise. Marcus listened carefully, nodding along until he noticed a discrepancy in Tom's plan. Based on his own experience with this route, he felt a slight adjustment to their course might improve safety. "Captain, I'd recommend shifting our altitude slightly near Denver," he offered, trying to sound as neutral as possible. "It could help us avoid the worst of the turbulence." Tom's face hardened as he looked over at Marcus. "Johnson, you're here to follow orders, not second-guess them. If I wanted your input, I'd ask." The comment stung, and Marcus could feel his face flush. He met Tom's gaze, his voice steady. "Understood, Captain." Mia and Greg exchanged glances, and Marcus sensed their silent support. But Tom's words echoed in his mind, a constant reminder of the obstacles he faced. As he went through the rest of the briefing, he resolved to keep his focus on what mattered: his performance, his professionalism, and his own sense of integrity. Later that day, Marcus and Tom took off on the Denver-bound flight, with turbulence expected along the route. As they neared the Rockies, Marcus kept a close eye on the radar, monitoring the conditions as they entered a particularly rough patch of air. The turbulence rocked the plane, sending a wave of unease through the cabin. Passengers clutched their seats, and the lights flickered briefly as the aircraft lurched. Tom's usual calm seemed to waver, his responses slower than usual. Sensing the tension, Marcus spoke up. "Captain, adjusting altitude now would reduce the turbulence by a significant margin." Tom hesitated, his gaze fixed ahead, and for a moment Marcus wondered if he would finally accept the suggestion. But Tom's pride won out, and he tightened his grip on the controls. "Stay on course," he said firmly, his voice betraying a hint of unease. The turbulence continued, jostling the plane and rattling the nerves of everyone aboard. Mia's voice came over the intercom, doing her best to reassure the passengers. Marcus clenched his jaw, frustrated but resolved. He followed Tom's instructions, but the moment solidified his resolve to trust his instincts and pursue his goals with unwavering dedication. Despite Tom's stubbornness, Marcus's actions during the turbulent flight did not go unnoticed. In the debriefing session after they landed, Tom was unusually quiet, offering no critique or feedback. It was a small but telling change, one that hinted at a reluctant respect beneath his gruff exterior. As Marcus prepared to leave, Tom looked over at him, his expression unreadable. "You did well up there," he muttered, barely meeting Marcus's gaze. Caught off guard, Marcus simply nodded. "Thank you, Captain." Tom's acknowledgement was brief, almost reluctant, but it marked a shift in their dynamic. For the first time, Marcus sensed that Tom might be questioning his own assumptions. It wasn't a full resolution, but it was a step, a small opening that hinted at the possibility of change. In the days that followed, Marcus reflected on the journey so far. His determination was stronger than ever, his confidence tempered by the challenges he'd faced. He continued to study, improve his skills, and earn the trust of the crew, knowing that each flight brought him closer to his goal. And while he couldn't control Tom's opinion, he knew that his own dedication would one day prove itself undeniable. For Marcus, every challenge, every test, was fuel for his growth and resilience. The journey was far from over, but he was ready to face it, one flight at a time. A few weeks later, Marcus and Tom were scheduled for a cross-country flight from Chicago to Los Angeles. Severe weather warnings loomed, predicting storms along the route that would require precise maneuvering and constant communication. Tom, with his extensive experience, took the warnings in stride, but Marcus remained alert, fully aware that this flight could test them both in unexpected ways. As they conducted pre-flight checks, Marcus reviewed the storm pattern, mentally preparing himself. He knew this flight would demand every ounce of focus and skill he possessed, especially given the storm's unpredictable nature. Tom glanced over his shoulder, catching Marcus studying the radar. "Nervous, Johnson?" Tom asked, his tone laced with challenge. Marcus shook his head, keeping his voice steady. "Just staying prepared, Captain. The storm looks intense." Tom scoffed lightly, dismissing the concern. "It's just another day at the office. Follow my lead, and we'll be fine." Despite Tom's words, Marcus could feel the tension rising as they taxied onto the runway. He'd learned by now not to expect Tom's approval. But this flight felt different. A high-stakes test that would force them both to confront the limits of their patience, skill, and trust. As they gained altitude, the first signs of turbulence hit. The plane shuddered as they flew through dense, dark clouds, and the horizon blurred in sheets of rain. Marcus monitored the controls, his senses sharpened. The storm grew in intensity, buffeting the aircraft and causing brief drops that rattled the passengers. Tom kept a tight grip on the controls, his usual calm demeanor tinged with strain. When the plane hit a particularly rough patch, Marcus checked the radar, noticing a potential route adjustment that could steer them toward clearer skies. He turned to Tom, raising his voice over the hum of the engines. "Captain, if we adjust to the east, we can avoid the worst of it." Tom didn't respond immediately, his focus fixed on the storm. Seconds stretched into silence, and Marcus felt a surge of urgency. "Captain," he repeated, "the radar's showing a clearer path to the east. It's the safest route through." Tom's face remained tense, but his pride held firm. "Stay on course," he barked, his voice a mix of frustration and determination. Marcus's hands clenched, but he knew he had to trust his judgment. If Tom refused to listen, it was up to him to keep a steady hand and ride out the storm. As lightning flashed outside the window, Marcus focused on his instruments, bracing for whatever lay ahead. Minutes later, the turbulence intensified, jolting the plane violently. Warning lights flickered on the dashboard, signaling pressure fluctuations and destabilized controls. Marcus's adrenaline surged, every nerve on high alert. He glanced at Tom, who seemed momentarily stunned by the rapid escalation. "Captain," Marcus said urgently, "we need to shift course now, or we risk losing stability." Tom hesitated, visibly rattled, but his pride kept him silent. As the plane shuddered under the strain, Marcus felt a surge of resolve. He couldn't let stubbornness jeopardize the lives of their passengers. He reached for the controls, his voice calm but firm. "I'm taking us east," he declared, guiding the plane toward the safer route. His hands moved steadily, overriding Tom's grip. For a tense moment, their gazes met. Tom's filled with resistance, Marcus's with unyielding determination. After what felt like an eternity, Tom released the controls, his expression unreadable. Marcus steered the plane through the turbulence, the shaking gradually easing as they navigated toward clearer skies. Once the plane leveled, an uneasy silence filled the cockpit. Marcus kept his focus on the instruments, his heart pounding with the realization of what he had done. He'd taken command, overridden the captain, and ensured the safety of everyone on board. It was a defining moment, one that neither he nor Tom could ignore. The flight landed in Los Angeles without further incident, but the tension in the cockpit lingered. As the engines powered down, Tom turned to Marcus, his face clouded with a mix of emotions: anger, embarrassment, perhaps even a flicker of respect. "Johnson," he said tightly, "we'll need to discuss this in the debriefing." Marcus met his gaze, his voice steady. "I understand, Captain. I did what I felt was necessary to keep the flight safe." Tom's mouth tightened, but he said nothing further. They disembarked, each lost in their own thoughts as they headed toward the debriefing room. Marcus felt a storm of emotions, a mixture of relief, pride, and the weight of potential consequences. He'd stood his ground, trusted his instincts, and saved the flight. But he knew he would have to face the fallout. In the debriefing room, Marcus and Tom sat across from each other, joined by a senior SkyTrail officer. The officer glanced between them, his expression neutral but observant. "Captain Sanders, I understand there was a deviation from the original course," he began, directing his attention to Tom. Tom hesitated, his gaze fixed on the table. "Yes," he admitted, though his tone was reluctant. "The turbulence was severe, and Johnson took initiative to reroute the flight east." The officer looked at Marcus, curiosity and a hint of approval in his eyes. "Mr. Johnson, would you care to explain your decision?" Marcus nodded, his voice calm but resolute. "The turbulence was increasing, and the radar indicated a safer route east. When I saw that the captain hadn't initiated a course change, I made a judgment call based on the safety of our passengers." A tense silence followed as the officer took in his response. After a moment, he nodded thoughtfully. "Given the circumstances, it sounds like you acted with the passengers' best interests in mind, Mr. Johnson." Tom's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The officer dismissed them with a simple reminder to prioritize communication in future flights. As they left the debriefing room, Tom stopped in the hallway, his expression conflicted. "You're skilled, Johnson," he said, his tone grudging, "but don't think you can just override my decisions any time you like." Marcus looked him squarely in the eyes, his voice firm. "I don't take decisions like that lightly, Captain. I only did what I thought was right for the crew and passengers." Tom regarded him in silence, an unreadable emotion flickering in his eyes. Without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving Marcus to contemplate the shift in their dynamic. For the first time, he sensed a fracture in Tom's armor, a subtle, almost reluctant respect that hinted at the beginning of change. Over the next few flights, the tension between Marcus and Tom remained, but there was an undeniable shift. Tom's critiques grew less frequent, his instructions more measured. While he hadn't openly acknowledged Marcus's skill, his actions spoke volumes, allowing Marcus more autonomy in the cockpit. Marcus, in turn, remained focused on honing his craft, aware that each flight presented new challenges and opportunities. The support from the crew had grown stronger as well. Mia and Greg made it a point to encourage him, and even other pilots began to take notice of his dedication and skill. One evening after a flight, Marcus found himself alone in the cockpit, reviewing the day's logs. He glanced up as Tom entered, pausing in the doorway with an unreadable expression. "You handled yourself well today," Tom said, his voice unexpectedly soft. Marcus looked up, surprised. "Thank you, Captain." Tom hesitated, his gaze distant. "I've been in this business a long time, Johnson. Seen plenty of pilots come and go. But not many would have done what you did back there in that storm." The admission hung in the air, raw and unguarded. Marcus sensed the struggle beneath Tom's words, the unspoken journey toward self-reflection that the captain was only beginning to acknowledge. After a moment, Tom straightened, regaining his composure. "Get some rest. We've got an early start tomorrow." As he walked away, Marcus felt a flicker of hope. The path to mutual respect would be long and uncertain, but for the first time, he sensed they were moving in the right direction. As he left the plane, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. He'd overcome countless hurdles, stood his ground in the face of adversity, and earned the respect of his peers. The journey was far from over, but he was ready to face each challenge with unwavering determination. With every flight, he grew more certain of his path, knowing that he was forging his own legacy, one marked not by resentment or rivalry, but by courage, resilience, and the belief that respect could bridge even the deepest divides. The following weeks brought a steady cadence of flights, and Marcus and Tom fell into a routine, though it was anything but predictable. Each trip brought its own unique challenges, from weather fluctuations to mechanical issues. But there was an unspoken understanding growing between them. They were no longer adversaries. They were a team, albeit a reluctant one. During a late-night flight from Seattle to Denver, the cockpit was filled with an air of camaraderie that had previously felt elusive. The two men worked seamlessly together, Marcus alertly monitoring the systems while Tom focused on navigation. As the plane cruised at 30,000 feet, Tom broke the comfortable silence. "You know, Johnson," he began, his tone casual, "I've been thinking about how we handle emergencies. I've been impressed with your composure under pressure." Marcus looked up, surprised by the compliment. Thanks, Captain. I've learned a lot from the way you manage the cockpit." Tom shook his head, chuckling softly. "It's about time I learned a thing or two from you." That moment marked a shift, the barriers slowly crumbling under the weight of mutual respect. Marcus felt a warmth spread through him. This was what he had hoped for when he joined SkyTrail. He knew they were still far from perfect, but this new dynamic felt promising. A few days later, while preparing for another flight, Marcus received a call from the operations center. A major storm was forecasted to hit the Midwest, leading to potential delays and cancellations. The airlines needed their crews to stay agile and prepared. After receiving the briefing, Marcus entered the cockpit to find Tom already deep in conversation with the operations manager. The tone was tense, and Marcus sensed that something wasn't right. "Johnson," Tom said, gesturing for him to join. "They're asking for us to reroute to avoid the storm, but we're already on a tight schedule. They want us to take the longer route to keep from flying through turbulence." Marcus listened as Tom expressed his concerns about the impact on passenger connections and operational delays. When Tom turned to him, Marcus felt a wave of responsibility wash over him. He understood the need to balance safety with efficiency. "Captain, if we adjust our altitude and maintain steady communication with air traffic control, we might be able to navigate the storm without significant delays," he suggested, recalling their previous experience. Tom's brow furrowed, clearly torn. "It's risky, Johnson. If we get caught in that storm, it'll be on my watch." Marcus met his gaze, determination etched across his face. "But if we go around, we risk delays that might affect our passengers' connections even more." "We can do this, Captain. We've managed tougher conditions before." After a moment of silence, Tom took a deep breath and his expression shifted. "All right, let's do it. We'll maintain a direct line with ATC and keep an eye on the radar." Marcus felt a surge of pride. This was not just about navigating the skies, but building a bridge of trust between them. As they took off, the skies were deceptively clear, but they knew the storm loomed ahead. The atmosphere in the cockpit was tense, yet focused. Marcus kept a watchful eye on the radar, his heart racing with anticipation. They flew toward the storm, and soon the first signs of turbulence began. The plane rocked gently, and Marcus felt a familiar rush of adrenaline. He exchanged a glance with Tom, who nodded, signaling that they were both ready. As they entered the storm, the turbulence escalated. The aircraft shook violently, sending a ripple of alarm through the cabin. Marcus and Tom worked in sync, their hands moving deftly over the controls, adjusting altitude and speed. "Keep us steady!" Tom shouted over the roar of the engines. "On it," Marcus replied, guiding the plane through the turbulence with skill and focus. The storm raged outside, but in the cockpit they were a well-oiled machine. Despite the chaos, a sense of clarity washed over Marcus. He had faced this storm before. Only now, he wasn't alone. Together, they maneuvered through the worst of the turbulence, and with Tom's steady guidance and Marcus's keen instincts, they managed to pull through to clearer skies. After what felt like an eternity, the storm began to recede, revealing a clear sky above. The cabin crew emerged from their seats, visibly shaken but relieved. Marcus and Tom shared a moment of silent acknowledgement, knowing they had navigated a significant challenge together. As they flew on, Marcus glanced over at Tom, who was now visibly more relaxed. "You handled that well, Captain," he said, genuine admiration in his voice. Tom shrugged, a small smile breaking through. "Couldn't have done it without you, Johnson. You kept your head in the storm." The words hung in the air, a milestone in their relationship. It was a moment of mutual respect forged in the heat of adversity, and for Marcus, it was a validation of his journey, a reminder that he belonged in this cockpit. With the storm behind them, the remainder of the flight passed without incident. However, the turbulence had shaken not just the plane, but also the fragile balance they had built. As they prepared to land, Marcus sensed a shift in the atmosphere. The next day, during a routine debriefing, Tom seemed distracted, his expression far away. Marcus noticed that he hadn't engaged in the usual discussions about their upcoming flights. When the crew dispersed, he approached Tom, concern evident in his voice. "Is everything okay, Captain?" Tom looked up, his brow furrowed. "Just thinking about some personal stuff. Family matters." Marcus nodded, understanding that life outside the cockpit could weigh heavily on one's mind. "If you need to talk about it, I'm here." Tom studied him for a moment, a flicker of vulnerability crossing his face. "Thanks, Johnson. I appreciate it. Just trying to balance everything, you know?" As the days passed, the tension persisted. Tom's distracted demeanor began to impact their work, and Marcus felt the weight of the changes they had both undergone. While he wanted to reach out, he also respected Tom's boundaries. During a late-night layover in San Francisco, Marcus found himself wandering the bustling streets, contemplating the changes he'd experienced. He stopped at a small cafe, the aroma of coffee filling the air. As he sipped his drink, he caught sight of a group of pilots at a nearby table laughing and sharing stories. It reminded him of the camaraderie he longed for with Tom. Marcus returned to the hotel and found Tom sitting alone in the lounge, a glass of whiskey in hand. He hesitated before approaching, but he felt an urge to break through the wall of silence that had grown between them. "Mind if I join you?" Marcus asked, gesturing to the empty chair. Tom nodded, his gaze distant. "Sure." For a moment, they sat in silence, the air thick with unspoken thoughts. Then Marcus took a deep breath. "I know things have been rough for you lately. If you want to talk about it, I'm here." Tom looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes. "Why do you care?" "Because we're a team," Marcus replied earnestly. "And I know what it's like to feel overwhelmed. We've all got our battles." Tom studied him, a mixture of skepticism and gratitude in his gaze. "It's not easy for me to open up. I've always kept things to myself." "I get that. But sometimes talking helps. You're not alone in this." After a long pause, Tom sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. "My father's health is declining. It's been weighing on me, and I don't know how to deal with it while keeping everything else together." Marcus nodded, his heart going out to Tom. "That's tough, Captain. I can't imagine what you're going through. Just remember that it's okay to ask for help." Tom's eyes softened, and for the first time, Marcus saw the cracks in his armor. "Thanks, Johnson. I appreciate it." As they talked, a new understanding began to take root. Marcus learned about Tom's family, the pressures of his upbringing, and the challenges he faced as a pilot, trying to balance work and personal life. In return, Marcus shared his own experiences, revealing the struggles he'd faced to earn his place in the cockpit. By the end of the evening, both men felt lighter, the burdens shared between them. It was a pivotal moment, one that deepened their bond and solidified their respect for one another. In the days that followed, their teamwork flourished. Tom became more engaged, and Marcus felt empowered to contribute ideas and suggestions. The atmosphere in the cockpit transformed, marked by collaboration and camaraderie. As they continued flying, Marcus reflected on how far he had come, not just in his career, but in building a genuine connection with Tom. Each flight brought new challenges, but together they tackled them head-on, proving that mutual respect and understanding could overcome any obstacle. On a clear afternoon flight to Miami, as they cruised at altitude, Tom turned to Marcus, a smile on his face. "You know, I've been thinking, we make a pretty good team." Marcus grinned, feeling a surge of warmth. "We do, Captain. I appreciate the way you've opened up. It makes a difference." Tom nodded, a newfound lightness in his demeanor. "Let's keep this going. Together we can face whatever comes our way." As the sun set on the horizon, casting a warm glow over the cockpit, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey ahead might be uncertain, but he knew they were ready to navigate whatever skies awaited them. As the weeks passed, Marcus and Tom grew increasingly comfortable in their partnership. They developed a rhythm, working seamlessly together as they tackled both routine flights and unexpected challenges. The crew respected their leadership, and passengers praised their professionalism. Everything seemed to be falling into place. But beneath the surface, the aviation industry was beginning to face turbulence of its own. Rumors of budget cuts and impending layoffs swirled within the airline, creating an atmosphere of uncertainty. Crew members exchanged nervous glances during briefings, their apprehension palpable. One afternoon, as Marcus and Tom prepared for another flight from Miami to New York, they overheard snippets of conversation in the operations room. A supervisor was discussing the need for cost-cutting measures. "Have you heard about the cuts?" "They're talking about reducing the number of flight crews," one staff member remarked. "Yeah, it's getting serious. I heard they might start letting go of some senior pilots," another responded, their voice tinged with concern. Marcus exchanged a glance with Tom, both of them feeling the weight of the news. The prospect of layoffs cast a shadow over their camaraderie, igniting a sense of urgency in their work. They both understood that their partnership could be pivotal in navigating this storm. As they boarded the plane, the mood among the crew was noticeably tense. Marcus and Tom exchanged reassuring nods, determined to maintain a calm environment for their team and passengers. Once in the cockpit, Marcus took a moment to check the flight systems, his heart racing with anticipation. "Looks like we're clear for takeoff," he announced, trying to infuse some positivity into the atmosphere. "Great," Tom replied, a faint smile appearing on his face. "Let's give them a smooth ride." As they ascended into the sky, Marcus felt a surge of excitement mixed with anxiety. They were well-trained, and their bond had grown stronger, but the uncertainty of the company's future loomed over them. He reminded himself that focusing on the flight was the best way to tackle their challenges head-on. The flight progressed smoothly until they reached the mid-Atlantic. Suddenly, a warning light flashed on the control panel, sending a ripple of concern through the cockpit. "Marcus, check that," Tom instructed, his tone shifting to a more serious note. "Got it," Marcus replied, quickly scanning the display. "We've lost the primary hydraulic system. We're running on backup." Tom's expression hardened. "We need to assess our options. Let's inform the crew and prepare for possible emergency procedures." As Marcus relayed the information to the cabin crew, he could hear the tension in their voices. They had trained for emergencies, but this was the first significant issue they had faced together. He returned to the cockpit, where Tom was already formulating a plan. "Okay, we've got to stay calm," Tom said, his voice steady. "We can still land safely, but we need to conserve our remaining hydraulic pressure. Prepare for a potential emergency landing in New York." Marcus nodded, his focus sharpening. "Let's run through the checklist for hydraulic failures and keep ATC in the loop." As they worked through the emergency procedures, Marcus felt a sense of adrenaline coursing through him. This was their moment to shine, to prove that their partnership could withstand any storm. "Remember, we're in this together," Marcus said, his voice firm. "If we work as a team, we'll get through this." Tom met his gaze, a spark of determination igniting in his eyes. "You're right. Let's do this." As they began their descent into New York, The cockpit was filled with the sounds of alerts and the rhythmic beeping of the control systems. Marcus and Tom remained focused, communicating seamlessly as they executed their plan. "Keep an eye on the hydraulic pressure," Tom instructed. "We need to make sure we have enough for landing gear deployment." "I've got it," Marcus assured him, glancing at the readings. "We're stable for now, but we need to act fast." The cabin crew informed passengers about the situation, assuring them that everything was under control. Marcus could hear the murmurs of concern from the back, but he remained focused on the task at hand. As they neared the runway, the backup hydraulic system began to show signs of failure. The cockpit lights flickered, and the alarms grew more insistent. "Prepare for landing gear deployment," Tom said, his voice tense but composed. "Deploying now," Marcus replied, his heart pounding as he pressed the button. The landing gear whirred to life, but instead of the expected smooth extension, there was a jarring thud. "We've lost hydraulic pressure," Marcus announced, panic creeping into his voice. "Switching to manual," Tom ordered, his focus unwavering. "We'll have to land with the gear down and pray for the best." As they approached the runway, Marcus felt a rush of adrenaline and fear. The plane shook violently, and he could sense the anxiety radiating from Tom. "Keep it steady, Johnson," Tom urged. "We've trained for this." Marcus gripped the controls, determined to keep the plane level. "I've got it!" On final approach. With every passing second, they drew closer to the runway, the stakes higher than ever. The roar of the engines filled the cockpit, and as they crossed the threshold, Marcus took a deep breath. "3, 2, 1, flare!" Tom shouted. Marcus pulled back gently on the yoke, and the plane touched down with a bone-jarring thud. They skidded along the runway, the brakes squealing as they fought for control. "Reverse thrust," Tom commanded, and Marcus quickly activated the throttles. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they brought the aircraft to a halt. The cockpit fell silent, their breaths heavy and ragged. As the cabin crew checked on the passengers, Tom and Marcus exchanged a look of disbelief. They had made it. "Good job, Johnson," Tom said, his voice breaking into a smile. "That was incredible." Marcus let out a relieved laugh. "We did it, Captain! I can't believe we got through that." Once the plane was secured, they exited the cockpit, where the crew greeted them with cheers. Passengers emerged from the cabin, visibly shaken but grateful. A few moments later, the airline's operations manager approached them, visibly impressed. "That was some quick thinking, both of you. You handled that emergency like pros." In the days following the incident, the tension that had once loomed over the crew dissipated. Marcus and Tom had proven to themselves and their team that they could face any challenge together. During a team debriefing, Marcus spoke up, addressing the crew. "I just want to say how proud I am of our team. We faced a serious challenge, but we worked together to overcome it. That's what makes us strong." Tom nodded in agreement. "Absolutely. This experience has shown us that when we trust each other and communicate, we can handle anything." As the crew shared their stories of the flight, laughter filled the room, a testament to their resilience. Marcus felt a sense of belonging he had long sought. That night, as Marcus lay in bed, he reflected on how far he had come. He had not only faced his fears, but had forged a bond with Tom that would carry them through future challenges. In the days following the emergency landing, the atmosphere at SkyTrail Airlines was charged with a mix of admiration and concern. News of the incident spread quickly through the company, and the operations department conducted a thorough debriefing session for Marcus, Tom, and the crew involved. Gathered in a conference room, Marcus and Tom sat at the front, facing a panel of senior executives. The room was filled with a sense of anticipation, and the air was thick with the unspoken weight of the recent crisis. The head of operations, Ms. Reynolds, began the meeting. "First and foremost, I want to thank you all for your quick thinking during that emergency. Your professionalism saved lives." Marcus felt a swell of pride at her words, but he could also sense the scrutiny from the executives. "We appreciate the support, Ms. Reynolds. We did what we had to do." "Absolutely," Tom added, his tone serious. "But we also need to look at what went wrong with the hydraulic systems to prevent this from happening again." Reynolds nodded, adjusting her glasses. "That's a good point, Captain. We need to conduct a thorough investigation into the mechanical failure. Your reports will be critical in this process. After the meeting, Marcus and Tom stepped out of the conference room, their expressions somber. The praise felt good, but the looming investigation weighed heavily on them. "Do you think we'll get into trouble?" Marcus asked, his brow furrowed with concern. Tom shook his head. "No, I think they'll appreciate how we handled it. But we need to stay vigilant and ensure we don't overlook anything in the future." As they walked down the bustling corridor, Marcus couldn't help but feel a surge of gratitude for Tom's leadership. "You know, I didn't realize how much we'd grown until this moment. We really did make a great team back there." Tom smiled, the tension easing from his shoulders. "Yeah, I guess we did. We've come a long way, haven't we?" Marcus nodded, reflecting on their journey. "From rivals to a solid team. I wouldn't want to go through that with anyone else." As the investigation unfolded, Marcus faced additional challenges. He received an email from the HR department regarding potential layoffs due to company budget cuts. The thought of losing his job sent a wave of anxiety coursing through him. That evening, Marcus sat in his apartment, staring at his phone. He considered reaching out to Tom, but he hesitated. They had built a strong bond in the cockpit, but would that extend beyond work? Eventually, he decided to call Tom. "Hey, Captain, can we talk?" "Of course, Marcus. What's up?" "I just got an email about possible layoffs. I'm worried about my position," Marcus admitted, his voice heavy with concern. There was a pause on the other end. "I get it. This whole situation is stressful, but I want you to know that I'm here for you. You've proven yourself as a valuable pilot." Marcus felt a rush of gratitude. "Thanks, Tom. I just don't want to go back to the uncertainty I faced before." "I understand. We'll figure this out together," Tom reassured him. The following week, the investigation into the hydraulic system failure began in earnest. Engineers from the maintenance department combed through the aircraft, scrutinizing every component to determine the cause of the malfunction. During a follow-up meeting, Marcus and Tom were called in to share their experiences. They recounted the details of the emergency landing, highlighting the quick decisions they had made in the cockpit. "Your actions saved the flight, but we need to know more about what led to the failure," Ms. Reynolds said, her gaze steady. "It's crucial we address any systemic issues." Marcus felt a pang of responsibility. "I'll do whatever it takes to ensure we're not put in that situation again. I've seen firsthand how quickly things can escalate." Tom added, "We need to strengthen communication between pilots and maintenance. If there are warning signs, we need to be informed before they become emergencies." The executives nodded in agreement, their expressions serious. The discussion illuminated the importance of teamwork across departments, reinforcing Marcus's belief in the value of collaboration. As the investigation progressed, Marcus learned that the company was not only focused on the technical aspects, but also on the mental well-being of their employees. They brought in a counselor to help the crew process their experiences from the emergency landing. During a group session, Marcus found himself opening up about his fears and anxieties. "I never realized how much pressure we face as pilots, especially when it feels like our jobs are on the line," he admitted. A fellow pilot nodded in agreement. "It's tough. We want to do our best, but the fear of failure can be paralyzing." Tom chimed in. "We need to support each other. We're a team, both in the cockpit and outside of it. That's how we'll get through this." The group shared stories, laughter, and tears, and Marcus felt a profound sense of connection with his fellow pilots. They were not just colleagues, they were a family navigating the same challenges. As the days passed, the investigation began to yield results. It was determined that the hydraulic system failure was due to a combination of factors, including a lack of communication between maintenance and the flight crews. At a follow-up meeting, Marcus and Tom were again called in to present their findings. "It's crucial that we create a more robust system for reporting issues," Marcus suggested. "If we communicate early about potential problems, we can prevent emergencies." Tom added, "And we need to make sure all crews are trained to handle these situations. Every pilot should feel confident in their ability to manage emergencies." The executives took their suggestions seriously. "We appreciate your input. We'll implement a new communication protocol immediately," Ms. Reynolds assured them. Marcus felt a sense of accomplishment. They were not just passengers on this journey. They were actively shaping the future of their airline. As the investigation wrapped up, news of potential layoffs still loomed. Marcus continued to worry about his job security, but he remained focused on his responsibilities as a pilot. He knew that the best way to deal with uncertainty was to stay grounded in his work. One afternoon, while preparing for a flight to Chicago, Marcus received a message from HR. The company would hold a meeting to discuss staffing changes. His heart sank at the thought of facing the reality of layoffs. Tom noticed Marcus's tense expression as they walked to the cockpit. "What's wrong?" "I just got an email about the staffing meeting." "I'm worried," Marcus admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Tom placed a reassuring hand on Marcus's shoulder. "You're not alone in this. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." Marcus nodded, appreciating Tom's support. "Thanks, Captain. I really needed that." On the day of the staffing meeting, tension filled the room. As executives began to speak, Marcus felt a mix of dread and anticipation. "Due to recent challenges, we have made the difficult decision to reduce staffing levels," the head of HR announced, her voice steady but somber. "We will be offering voluntary severance packages to those who wish to leave the company." Marcus's heart raced as he scanned the room. He could see the uncertainty etched on the faces of his colleagues. Tom squeezed his hand reassuringly, grounding him in the moment. "While we are reducing staff, we will also be implementing new training programs to ensure that our remaining team members are equipped to handle the evolving challenges in the industry," the HR representative continued. Marcus listened intently, knowing that the future of SkyTrail hinged on their collective efforts. He felt a surge of determination rise within him. After the meeting, Marcus and Tom found themselves in the break room, surrounded by their fellow pilots. The mood was heavy, but they knew they had to support one another. "I can't believe this is happening," one pilot lamented. "I've been here for over a decade. What will I do?" Tom stepped forward, his voice steady. "We're in this together. Let's look out for one another, no matter what happens. We need each other now more than ever." Marcus chimed in. "We've proven that we can overcome challenges as a team. Let's keep that spirit alive." The group nodded, and as they shared stories and support, Marcus felt a renewed sense of hope. They were more than just pilots. They were a community willing to lift each other up. As the dust settled after the staffing changes, Marcus found himself reflecting on his journey. The turbulence of the past months had tested him, but he emerged stronger and more resilient. Tom approached him one afternoon after a successful flight. "You know, I'm proud of how far we've come," he said, a smile on his face. "We faced challenges head-on, and we came out on the other side." "Thanks, Tom." "I couldn't have done it without your support," Marcus replied, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. As they prepared for their next flight, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, armed with the lessons he had learned and the strength of his partnership with Tom. Together, they would navigate the skies, turning turbulence into triumph. As the weeks rolled into months, Marcus and Tom found themselves settling into a new normal. The airline, though still facing challenges, was beginning to stabilize. The implementation of new protocols had led to improvements in safety and communication across departments. One afternoon, as they prepared for another flight, Marcus and Tom received an unexpected assignment. They would be co-piloting a high-profile international flight to London. This was a significant opportunity, but it also carried the weight of public scrutiny. "Are you ready for this?" Tom asked, his tone light but tinged with seriousness. "It's a big deal." "Absolutely," Marcus replied, feeling a surge of excitement. "This is our chance to showcase what we can do." As they reviewed the flight plan and prepared for takeoff, Marcus felt a mixture of anticipation and pressure. This flight could redefine their reputations and solidify their bond as a team. The day of the flight dawned bright and clear. Passengers filled the terminal, buzzing with excitement for their journey across the Atlantic. As Marcus and Tom checked in, they felt the weight of responsibility on their shoulders. "Let's keep our heads cool," Marcus said, trying to ease the tension. "We've trained for this." "Right," Tom agreed, his expression focused. "Let's give them a flight they won't forget, for all the right reasons." Once aboard the aircraft, they settled into the cockpit and began their pre-flight checks. The air was electric with anticipation, and Marcus felt his heart race as they prepared for takeoff. "Everything looks good," Tom announced, his voice steady. "Ready for pushback?" "Ready when you are," Marcus replied, his determination clear. The flight started smoothly, but as they reached cruising altitude, turbulence began to shake the aircraft. It was mild at first, but as they crossed the Atlantic, it intensified. "Buckle up, folks," Marcus announced over the intercom, his voice calm despite the growing turbulence. "We're expecting some bumpy skies ahead." Tom glanced at the instruments, his brow furrowing slightly. "We need to keep an eye on the weather reports. Let's stay in touch with ATC." As the turbulence escalated, Marcus felt a pang of anxiety. He reminded himself of the strength he had built alongside Tom. They had faced emergencies together. They could handle this too. Just as they settled into the flight, an alarm sounded in the cockpit, jolting both men. "What is that?" Tom asked, immediately shifting his focus to the instruments. "Fuel system alert," Marcus replied, his heart racing. "We're losing fuel pressure. Contact ATC and report the situation." "We need to divert to the nearest airport," Tom ordered, his voice steady despite the rising tension. Marcus quickly relayed the information to air traffic control, his heart pounding. "This is Flight 203 requesting emergency landing at Boston Logan. We've lost fuel pressure. Boston is clear for you, Flight 203. Maintain current altitude and prepare for vectors," the voice from ATC responded, calm yet authoritative. As they diverted, Marcus felt the weight of the situation. This was no longer just turbulence. They were facing a real emergency. As they approached Boston, the turbulence worsened, and the fuel pressure continued to drop. "Marcus, we need to prepare for a potential emergency landing," Tom said, his voice serious. "We have to keep the plane stable." "I'll manage the controls," Marcus replied, his determination igniting. "You focus on getting us down safely." Tom nodded, impressed with Marcus's resolve. "Let's do this." The plane shook violently as they descended, the pressure in the cabin fluctuating. Marcus felt the anxiety rising among the passengers and knew he had to reassure them. He activated the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're experiencing some turbulence, but we're diverting to Boston for a safe landing. Thank you for your patience." With their approach to Boston, Tom and Marcus communicated seamlessly, working together to manage the emergency landing. "Gear down," Tom called, keeping his focus sharp. "Landing gear is down," Marcus confirmed, scanning the cockpit for any additional alerts. "We're good on that front. Keep an eye on our speed." "We can't afford to stall," Tom reminded him, tension evident in his voice. Marcus adjusted the throttles, his heart racing as they descended toward the runway. "We've got this," he whispered to himself, trying to focus on the task at hand. As they neared the runway, the plane bounced and shook, a final reminder of the turbulent journey they had faced. "Brace for impact," Tom instructed, his voice firm. With one final surge of energy, the aircraft touched down on the runway, skidding slightly but remaining under control. The roar of the engines filled the cockpit, and as they slowed down, Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him. "We did it!" Marcus exclaimed, laughter escaping him despite the gravity of the situation. Tom smiled, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. "Nice work, Johnson. That was one hell of a landing." As they taxied to the gate, they could hear the relief and applause from the cabin crew and passengers. Once the plane was secured, Marcus and Tom stepped out of the cockpit to greet the crew and passengers. The atmosphere was filled with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. "Thank you for your professionalism," a flight attendant exclaimed, her voice filled with relief. As they exited the plane, they were met by the airport's emergency response team. "Are you both all right?" one of the responders asked, concern evident in their eyes. "We're fine," Tom replied. "Just a few bumps in the sky." In the aftermath, Marcus and Tom gathered with the crew for a debriefing. They recounted the events, emphasizing their teamwork and communication throughout the emergency. The successful emergency landing gained media attention, and soon the airline was inundated with praise for their swift actions. They became local heroes, and the story spread through social media. In the following weeks, Marcus received an unexpected call from the airline's corporate office. They wanted to feature him and Tom in a promotional video highlighting their teamwork during the crisis. "Are you serious?" Marcus asked, disbelief evident in his voice. "Absolutely! We want to showcase your dedication and skill," the representative responded enthusiastically. Marcus shared the news with Tom, who smiled broadly. "This is a great opportunity for us, Marcus. We can inspire others with our story." As they prepared for the promotional shoot, Marcus felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. He had never been in the spotlight before, but with Tom by his side, he felt ready to embrace the challenge. During the shoot, they recounted their experiences during the emergency landing, emphasizing the importance of teamwork and communication. As they spoke, Marcus realized how far he had come since his first days as a pilot. He had overcome his insecurities and grown into a confident, capable professional. As the video wrapped up, the producer turned to them with a smile. "You both did an amazing job. I think this will resonate with many aspiring pilots." After the shoot, Marcus and Tom celebrated their success over dinner. "I'm proud of us, Tom," Marcus said, raising his glass. "We've built something special here." "Here's to our partnership," Tom replied, clinking his glass against Marcus's. "And to all the skies we'll conquer together." As the excitement from their promotional video began to settle, Marcus and Tom found themselves back in the routine of flying. However, the airline had shifted gears significantly since the emergency landing, and they felt the momentum building. During a staff meeting, Ms. Reynolds addressed the entire crew. "Thanks to your hard work and dedication, we're seeing improvements across the board. Our safety protocols are being recognized in the industry, and I'm proud to say we'll be expanding our fleet soon." A murmur of excitement swept through the room. New planes meant new opportunities. Additionally, Ms. Reynolds continued, "We will be introducing a mentorship program for aspiring pilots, and we want both Marcus and Tom to lead it." Marcus felt a mix of pride and apprehension at the thought. "Us?" he whispered to Tom. "Why not? You two have proven yourselves as exemplary pilots and team players," Ms. Reynolds said, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. As they began preparations for the mentorship program, Marcus and Tom met with a group of aspiring pilots. The energy in the room was palpable as they introduced themselves and shared their stories. "Remember, every pilot faced challenge," Tom began, addressing the group. "What matters is how you respond to those challenges." Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of their new roles as mentors. "We're here to guide you, but we also want you to learn from your own experiences. Mistakes will happen. It's how you grow from them that counts." As they engaged with the trainees, Marcus couldn't help but reflect on his own journey. He had once been the nervous rookie, but now he stood confidently as a leader, ready to inspire the next generation. Over the following weeks, Marcus and Tom developed a strong rapport with the trainees. They organized simulator sessions, workshops, and flight shadowing experiences, fostering a supportive environment where questions were encouraged and fears could be addressed. During one particularly memorable workshop, a trainee named Emily spoke up, her voice shaking. "I've been struggling with landing techniques. I'm scared I'll never get it right." Marcus stepped forward, his expression warm. "I struggled with landings too. Let's work on it together. Remember, it's all about practice. The more you do it, the more comfortable you'll feel." The group nodded in agreement, feeling the camaraderie that Marcus and Tom had created. They practiced together, sharing tips and encouragement, reinforcing the idea that they were all in this journey together. As the program progressed, the trainees were given an opportunity to fly a short training flight with Marcus and Tom. The excitement in the air was electric as everyone gathered at the airport. "Today, you'll experience a taste of what it's like to be in the cockpit," Tom announced, his eyes sparkling. "But remember, this is a team effort." Marcus watched as Emily and the other trainees climbed aboard, their faces filled with anticipation. He felt a swell of pride, knowing that he and Tom were guiding them. Once in the air, Marcus took the lead. "Let's go over the flight plan. Emily, I want you to take control during the initial climb." Emily's eyes widened in surprise. "Me? Absolutely. You've practiced this. Trust yourself," Marcus encouraged. With Tom's guidance, Emily took the controls and the plane ascended smoothly into the sky. Marcus felt a rush of excitement as he watched her confidence grow. Mid-flight, however, the weather took an unexpected turn. Dark clouds loomed ahead, and turbulence began to shake the aircraft. "Marcus, we need to adjust our flight path to avoid that storm," Tom said, his voice steady. "Emily, listen carefully," Marcus instructed. "We're going to make some adjustments to the heading. Can you handle that?" Yes, I can," she stammered, her focus sharpening. As they navigated through the turbulence, Marcus and Tom supported Emily, guiding her through the challenges. "Stay calm. Remember your training," Tom reassured her. After a few tense moments, they broke through the clouds into clear skies, and a cheer erupted in the cockpit. "You did it, Emily!" Marcus exclaimed, grinning broadly. After landing, the trainees were buzzing with excitement. They gathered for a debriefing, and Marcus took a moment to reflect on their journey. "Today was a great example of teamwork," he said, looking at each trainee. "You all handled the turbulence like pros. Remember, it's not just about flying, it's about working together." Tom added, "You've all come so far. Keep pushing yourselves, and don't hesitate to ask for help. That's how you grow." The trainees nodded, their faces alight with enthusiasm. They had faced a challenge together and emerged stronger for it. As the mentorship program continued, Marcus and Tom's bond deepened. They not only became colleagues, but also friends. They celebrated milestones, shared meals, and leaned on each other during stressful days. One evening, after a particularly rewarding day with the trainees, Marcus turned to Tom. "I'm grateful for everything we've built together. I never thought I'd find a partner like you." Tom smiled, his eyes reflecting understanding. "I feel the same. We faced so much, and we've come out stronger. Let's keep this going." However, as their mentorship program flourished, they faced a new challenge. SkyTrail Airlines announced that they would be competing for a prestigious international aviation award. The company needed a team of their best pilots to demonstrate excellence in safety, training, and community impact. "Marcus, I want you and Tom to lead our presentation," Ms. Reynolds said during a strategy meeting. "This is a chance to showcase what we've accomplished." Marcus felt a mix of excitement and pressure. "We'll do our best," he assured her. As they prepared for the presentation, Marcus and Tom worked tirelessly, developing a comprehensive plan that highlighted their achievements and the success of their mentorship program. The day of the award presentation arrived, and the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. As they entered the conference room filled with industry experts and competitors, Marcus felt his heart race. Tom placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We've got this. Remember everything we've accomplished." As they began their presentation, Marcus spoke with passion about their safety protocols and the success of their trainees. Tom followed, emphasizing the importance of teamwork and communication. When they concluded, the room erupted in applause. The judges expressed admiration for their initiative and the impact it had made. Days later, SkyTrail Airlines received news that they had won the prestigious award, a testament to the hard work of everyone involved. The celebration that followed was a joyous affair, with all staff coming together to acknowledge their achievement. As Marcus and Tom stood on stage to accept the award, Marcus looked out at his colleagues, his heart swelling with pride. "This is for all of us. We faced challenges together, and we emerged stronger as a team." As the crowd cheered, Marcus realized that he had not only grown as a pilot, but had also forged a lasting bond with Tom and their community. With the mentorship program thriving and new opportunities on the horizon, Marcus knew that their journey was just beginning. Together, they would continue to soar to new heights, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the sun set on a successful celebration, Marcus and Tom stepped outside, the vibrant colors of the sky reflecting their newfound hope and determination. "Can you believe it? We actually did it!" Marcus exclaimed, his face beaming with joy. Tom laughed, clapping him on the back. "We sure did. But this is just the beginning. There's so much more to accomplish." As they walked toward their cars, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling of excitement bubbling within him. He turned to Tom. "I want to keep sharing our journey, the highs, the lows, everything. There's a community out there that could benefit from our experiences. I love that idea, Tom agreed. We can inspire others who are just starting out. We should document our adventures, our mentorship, and all the lessons we learn along the way. And so, a new chapter began. They created a blog and social media accounts, inviting others to join them on their journey in the world of aviation. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more updates on our experiences as pilots and mentors. We'll be sharing tips, stories, and insights that will hopefully inspire the next generation of aviators, Marcus said, excitement in his voice. With a shared vision, they set off to capture their adventures, determined to make a positive impact on the world around them. As they launched their first post, they smiled at the thought of what was to come. Together, they would navigate the skies, continue their journey of growth, and inspire countless others to chase their dreams.